this evening and tomorrow to allow everyone to share their ideas with others. But we do have some speakers that we need to hear from to get the background where we are. And, Byron Dale, come up here and give us some of your background. And I heard you a little bit last night, and very much interested in your
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity. And I really want to thank Walt and the rest of people who put this on, because this is the kind of thing the nation really needs. And I will give Walt, he is probably the best man I've ever met in my life to get people of this quality together. And I really is, and I'm sincere about that. But now let's be honest. He has to work all with volunteers. I have no ability to do that. But if I had the money to hire everybody to do what you're doing now and pay you a big wage, which one do you think would be the most successful at this? And that's what we fight. We fight a banking system, and that's where this all comes from. Every problem stems from the same root. And the Federal Reserve, the story of banks, the Federal Reserve Bank of New Jersey says banks can extend and expand our money supply by making loans and investments. Now just tell me, how can you beat a man that can create his own money for his own investments and then loan you your money for all your investments? And you can't have any money until you borrow it from him. Now the interest is the only thing I know of that goes 24/7 and never needs to be stopped for rest or lubrication or repair or anything. How can you beat that? And that's the enemy we fight. Every idea is pushed by money. Walt had to pay it for us to be in this hall, correct? Has anybody got here that didn't spend any money or travel on transportation? The only way you're ever going to defeat these guys is cut off their power to create all the medium exchange. And that's what I'm here to talk about. Now, I wrote a letter to the FDIC. Practically, that's not true. I called them, got a hold of Rodney Heck, and I asked him the question. I want to take your time, and I want to know, can banks create money as investments as well as they do, as the same way they do when they make loans? He said, yes. I said, who would control that? He said, well, that's a really hard question to answer. It all depends on whether they're a federal bank or a state bank, or even maybe on how big the bank is. I really can't answer that question. I said, let's just deal with state banks, state chartered banks. What would control what they can invest in? And he said, well, just whatever the state legislature said. So we have right now, and people have talked about some problems, and I'm not going to touch problems because I know you all know them, and I agree with everything he said. Why repeat it? I'm only talking about solutions and the tools we have in our hands right today to cut them off at the knees and put an end to this stuff. It started right over here, and it also continued right there. And Charlie Duke, who started this sovereignty movement, in other words, demand our 10th Amendment rights back. Get the government back in the box where they belong and let the states do it and the people do what they're supposed to do. Now, if we put that and got that in all the states, and then we passed this legislation so we could create our own money debt-free, we'd cut them off with the knees. Because if you could earn your money and have it, and we all think we do that, but we don't, because the only money you can earn is money that somebody else borrowed. I have a letter from the Library of Congress that says there is no such thing as debt-free law under American law. It does not exist. Either you borrow from the banks or it does not exist. And when you do borrow from the banks, and I have another personal letter, oops, I forgot to bring that one up, from the Library of Congress, it says that money is created when loans are extended, and money is extinguished or destroyed when a loan is paid back. So I personally wrote a letter to the United States Treasury, and I have this all here in this yellow paper, and this is back here. You can all have that. And Robert Hemphill, who was the credit manager of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, said that all bank loans, if all bank loans were paid, there would not be $1 of bank deposit, and there would not be $1 of coin and currency in circulation. That's a staggering thought. We are completely, absolutely without a permanent monetary system. When one gets a complete grasp of the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless situation is almost incredible. And that's where this all stems from. Because they have the money to things men like to go after, money and power. Once you can create all your own money, there's nothing left but to get more power, is there? And I never seen a man that got power and he didn't want more of it. And that's what we fight. It's very simple. Now the question is, what do we do about it? Now let's really talk about what kind of money they create. Now this is the Federal Reserve book, Purpose and Function, put out the Federal Reserve Board themselves. On page 6 it says, all bank deposits are a form of credit. And that, by the way, is all we use for money. We have no money whatsoever in our economy, not one penny. At the very least, money should be something you pay your bills with and never have to deal with any of it again. If I traded my coat for your shirt, it'd be a done deal, wouldn't it? We'd never had any third parties and we'd never have to visit the issue again. That's at least what money ought to be, but credit is not that. You borrow it, you got to be in debt for it, you got to pay interest on it. Oh, by the way, I wrote a letter to the United States Treasury and asked him how money was created. And Russell Monk, the General Counsel, wrote back to me and said, well, the actual creation of money always involves an extension of credit from a private commercial bank. Not the Federal Reserve System, but the private commercial banks, all of them. So having been a rancher and borrowed lots of money, I wrote and said, well, I got an interesting question for you. If all the money is created as interest-bearing loans, where does the money come from to pay the interest? And he wrote back and said, well, that money comes from the same source the other money comes from. You've got to go back to the bank and borrow that too. Now, John Yetter, and all this research is right here on this back page. John Yetter, a friend of mine in New Jersey, wrote a letter to the Treasury, and he got a better answer. And he said, I don't see it right here, but it's there. The money that one man uses to pay interest comes from somebody else's loaned principal. We can only get money to pay the interest if we go out and capture somebody else's borrowed money. Now, if you borrow the money and I capture it, I got the money, I got no debt, I got it going, you got the debt and no money, and you owe that back plus the interest on it. You're in an impossible situation. That's why we have over 1.5 million bankruptcies every stinking year. We have no recession except what the banks created. You cannot have a recession without banks creating it. It's impossible. The only other reason you could have one if you had a national catastrophe, a drought or something where you just could have no production. Everything in life does two things. It starts from a seed, it grows, it matures, and it does everything in its power to spread its seed. You ever notice that? And everything wants to have more of itself. I've noticed it with really people, men, they like to reproduce. Have you noticed that? So do plants and animals and everything I know. So why is there a recession? Banks pull back the money. Now let's really think about, also in this book is Modern Money Mechanics from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, given to me personally by Robert Sweeney, at that time Vice President of the Federal Immediate Credit Bank of Omaha. When the banks discovered, I changed that word, it said then the banks discovered they could make loans merely by giving borrowers their promise to pay. Now how in the heck can you have a loss when you only promise to give them something? If I give you my coat, if I promised to give you my coat and never took it off, could you suffer a loss? Could I suffer a loss if I never got the coat back? Who in the world are we kidding? So the only way out of this is do exactly like he started, what they would do, and what they're trying to do, and what I worked 26 years to develop this. Pardon me. Actually 14 years in the Minnesota legislature to develop this piece of paper. I spent the other years trying to figure out how to get that far. Now, I didn't say I was no genius, but I'm committed.
This crowd ever accused you.
Oh, Charlie do.
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie. If I said Davis, I misspoke. And I'm really famous for misspeaking. I'm passionate. I get excited. I want to get this in a hurry. I want you to understand. And I sometimes misspeak. And I've only also discovered after I get 65, they shifted a gear and I just don't quite have it like I used to have. I'm sure they never noticed that. I'm sure these guys never noticed that.
Don't put that on YouTube.
He edits it, don't worry. That's why I let him come, because he does edit it. And I have a sense of humor.